So ladies, gentlemen, welcome to a brand new news roundup video. First, I want to start off with the brand new trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu. Because, you know, I guess I could start off by saying that I am a fan. Out of all of Disney Star Wars, The Mandalorian is one where I feel like the overall majority of the fandom can feel like, okay, you know, out of whatever your thoughts are on what Star Wars has put out, Disney has put out with Star Wars since they acquired it, there are a few good nuggets, and The Mandalorian Season 1 was absolutely one of those. Now, Andor, for me, is absolutely at the top, you know, but arguably one of the best things to ever come out of Star Wars. But after the previous season of The Mandalorian, a lot of people, myself included, felt like it wasn't as good as previous seasons. Don't get me wrong, not to be all negative here. Of course, there's still things to appreciate about Season 3 of The Mandalorian. But, you know, it's still mostly the case for a lot of us that it's a bit like, that was a bit of a miss. And then we knew we were looking to The Mandalorian and Grogu as an actual movie that is releasing. So I wanted to preface all of that just because, you know, it's fairly important to remind ourselves of the journey so far and look at Disney and Star Wars as a whole. And we've got this trailer now, and I don't know how to put my finger on it, but it doesn't feel like, for the first thing that you want to put out, that, okay, you know, as it says here, experience it only in theaters May 22nd, 2026. And my first reaction, I suppose, is that as cool as this is, seeing an AT-AT or an AT-AT, or however you want to say it, fall off a cliff, and seeing cute little Grogu and Mando go up against some freaking like Warhammer level knight-looking things, and, you know, some of the alien designs feeling just as much the classic Star Wars alien design that I love with what The Mandalorian has done before, it still feels kind of like a streaming movie to me. And I'm not the only one. Like, I've compiled a few takes here online. One here saying, as much as I want to be excited for this, it just looks like 4 episodes of The Mandalorian stamped together. I hope there's a bigger point to this movie we aren't seeing. Here we have another one saying, I am a Star Wars fanatic. I yearn for more Star Wars movies. I miss them. I'm a fan of The Mandalorian. So why didn't The Mandalorian and Grogu trailer get me super excited? Another one here saying this should be a Disney Plus special. It does not look interesting enough to put my butt in a movie theater seat that will cost me $20 plus. This one from Resident Justice saying this looks like a great streaming movie. So I feel like you get the point here. Now, I do want to stress, because I know somebody will say this, but Boba, this is just the first teaser. Why are people really coming down this hard on the first teaser? I see the defense there with how this trailer is not going to give away absolutely everything, whether Filoni does pack in something pretty mad, you know, that we can't possibly see coming, which, you know, would in turn get fans excited. I get that, but first teasers are still pretty important. And yes, a teaser, not even a trailer, so it's not truly doing the proper trailer thing or job that a trailer needs to do. A teaser is meant to just tease you, and what this teases us with, I think this is the answer for a lot of us. It's like, oh, this is meant to be The Mandalorian and Grogu, like the Disney Star Wars movie. And yes, you've teased us, but you've teased us with what feels like maybe 2 or 3 or so, maybe 4 episodes of The Mandalorian into one. And I think that people might be like, well, that's exactly what a Mandalorian movie is, right? Like, you've seen The Mandalorian in episodes, and now you're going to see it in a movie. So it's just a few episodes. But you get what I'm saying. If you've made the choice to make a movie go into theaters, as well as IMAX, by the way, you kind of, I don't know, expect a bit more prestige. And this being forged for IMAX, it just, I don't know. I hate sounding so negative here, but it just seems all right, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll watch that. It would feel so much, it would make so much more sense if this was a Disney Plus release, like a special. And I hate seeing that, because I want us to go to the theaters more, movies and whatnot. I like these characters. I like Din Djarin. I like Grogu. But am I excited for this? In terms of advertising this to a consumer, You advertise me your product. That just, I don't know, rolled by like a commercial back in the day in between an episode of Malcolm in the Middle. Moving on now to DC. DC Studios, because we're starting off with Matt Reeves as the Batman here before going on to what James Gunn teased with Man of Tomorrow. We need to get into some Brainiac talk as well as some other teasers for DCU Batman and stuff. First, with the Batman Part 2. On Batman Day, we had Matt Reeves tweet out something which I really want to read into just out of pure copium here. So he said, I feel so honored to be preparing to shoot the next chapter of our story. This character means so much to me. What a privilege. Can't wait to share lots of exciting things about the movie with you, all in the weeks and months to come. Happy Batman Day. And obviously the emphasis is on weeks when he says weeks and months to come. So let's try and be comprehensive here. On one side, he could have just been loose with his words and he could have been like, yeah, I can't wait to share more with you in the weeks and months to come. We're shooting in April going into May, so weeks and months to come when really it is more months. But on the copium side, he literally said weeks. And that means, given that the movie is shooting in April or maybe at the start of May, we will be hearing major things like rumors for an actor being attached to the project. So could we be getting that very soon in the weeks ahead? Some of you may remember that Matt Reeves did this previously through posting GIFs on Twitter when an actor was cast, such as Robert Pattinson, a GIF from Good Time, I believe, Colin Farrell as a GIF for the Penguin. So we could be getting a GIF in October for whoever else is being cast in Part 2. We're getting a new Rogues Gallery villain. We talked about that in my video on Saturday. Do check that out if you haven't already. We explored what Matt Reeves meant by teasing how the villain has never really been done before, and I kind of look into the way he said that in a bit of a different way to what some people were taking in. But nevertheless, a gift for whoever that is. And October, kind of a perfect time to do it. Could the weeks ahead be, I don't know, Halloween? But not only that, we could be getting lots of other information. We could be getting news of how Greg Fraser's been replaced by this cinematographer. We could hear about maybe a new production designer because James Chinland might be pretty busy with the whole Narnia thing that it might not work out in time for him to come onto the Batman Part 2. But as for the months to come, that's another thing I'm really excited for because Matt Reeves, genuinely, even though he's not actually mega active on Twitter and social media, he would tease more for the Batman than what we got out of something like, Supergirl from Craig Gillespie. So do you guys remember when he posted those pictures of Pattinson in the Batsuit standing by the Batmobile? That was just so cool. We got another couple of photos of the Batmobile. We also got a picture of the mayor dead in the seat with No More Lies. There was stuff. He didn't flood us with it, but there was things that fed the content here on the channel for us to speculate about in the Batman discussion series. So I have no doubt when we're getting to April, May, day one shooting, we're going to get a tease. Before that, we could get some pre-production teases of maybe Pattinson in the suit again. It's a very, 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 very exciting time. So I can't wait for the next couple of years on the channel. But I wanted to just cover that first because basically, watch this space. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for any breaking news that we could be getting very soon in the weeks ahead for the Batman Part 2. Sometime, maybe even in October. Now up next, we had James Gunn tease the second draft of the script for Man of Tomorrow. And yes, the elephant in the room is the image he decided to put on the script. Now, for those of you who looked into this super far, yes, it's just a royalty-free kind of or stock image. It's not that deep, but it's what the image symbolizes in terms of Gunn put this on there for a reason. And that reason is, I think, pretty clear to us. The most basic observation would be, okay, that's a head with the anatomy basically highlighting the brain stem going down the head. And yes, why would a brain being highlighted on the Man of Tomorrow script be important? Well, obviously that's because the biggest speculation that is really out there for a lot of us is that the villain for Man of Tomorrow that could unite Lex Luthor and Superman together, as well as, maybe the Justice Gang and Supergirl and Lobo and other heroes in the DCU to help support against such a big threat, is none other than Brainiac. Now, I have seen some people be like, okay, well, maybe should we really be thinking Brainiac? What if it's Ultra Humanite? A character who basically takes his brain and encases it into a whole different kind of, host. So you could argue, you could argue that, right? Some people are saying the brain as in the Brotherhood of Evil brain. But I think most of us would feel most comfortable being like, well, okay, what's one character that Gunn even considered to somehow use in the Superman movie, and that was Brainiac. What's a character that many fans have been wanting to see in a Superman movie for a long time? That is Brainiac. So it does seem logical that outside of the main highlight and focus of what he wants to explore with Lex Luthor and Superman working together, let's also tie a bow on that exploration with a villain like Brainiac. So up next, we have quite a few comments to dig into from James Gunn about all kinds of things in the DCU. Now, a big shout out to Mallory Rubin from the Ringerverse for basically having this interview with Gunn and giving us quite a few things to talk about. I don't know if I'll be able to get into everything, so I'm just going to try and extract the biggest, juiciest things that I wanted to cover here. So when Gunn was being asked about connective tissue going into Man of Tomorrow, he replied, "I want to make sure that people can pick up and watch something without having to see something before it." So that said, episode 8 is important to Man of Tomorrow as anything. So kind of more of the same there, but basically, the way I look at this, despite people like really digging into that, being like, well, how can we watch Man of Tomorrow if we skip Peacemaker? Or what about the kids? They can't watch Peacemaker, so what if, since it sets it up, how are they going to understand anything? Well, because guess what? You can still watch Man of Tomorrow and you'll be clued in the first 5-10 minutes of the movie. However, that still could mean that he teases Brainiac in Man of Tomorrow. Maybe the dimensional rifts in Peacemaker Season 2 send out like the 3-body problem Netflix show type signal which attracts Brainiac to Earth, which means people need to work together to solve this threat. Again, that's just a random theory that we've been talking about here on the channel. So now moving on to some of the other juicy responses from James Gunn. When being asked by Mallory Rubin from the Ringerverse about the tonal shifts in the DCU and how Gunn navigates it all, given the different projects we'll see in the future of the DCU. He says, I never really give it a thought. When I'm writing a movie or a TV show or whatever, there's a definite lane that it's in. There's a part of what is natural to that story. So when you see characters in one project versus another, there's definitely a different vibe. And it isn't only like language or dirtiness or anything like that. There's a different vibe to Peacemaker. It's just much more gritty and grounded in a certain way. Its gravity is a much bigger part of the story. And even when actors come in from, I'm trying to remember where we are in the season, you're on 5, so there's a lot more to come. But when we see characters that are in both worlds, instantly I notice that there's a shift in the performances, and there's something more glorious in Superman. So I do find it quite funny with how he basically almost gave away which maybe actors were coming over from something else. Superman, with thinking Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor will be in Peacemaker, but could David Corn switch Superman? But as for Man of Tomorrow, he continues to say here, but even between projects, I don't think that the story in Man of Tomorrow is slightly tonally different from Superman. They aren't exactly the same. Superman's more comic booky in some ways than Man of Tomorrow, and it has to do with the dual characters of Lex and Superman at the center of Man of Tomorrow and other things. So that's really intriguing to hear that he doesn't view Man of Tomorrow tonally the same as Superman. And not only that, Superman that we just had released is quite a bit more comic booky in some ways than Man of Tomorrow. So the way I think the audience reads that is, when we talk about Gunn's DC universe, I've always described it as very comic booky, like fantastical, because in the comics you literally have Batman, flying around and interacting maybe with a supernatural ghost, right? You can have him, riding on the freaking back of a parademon across the skyline of Gotham City. You can have Superman be zapped out the air by some kind of magic user. Like, it's very comic booky, and Superman definitely embraced all of that with kaijus and, everything else that we had, which introduced us to the DCU. But, with Man of Tomorrow, I always expected it to be just as comic booky because I felt like that was the tone Gunn was going for especially with projects that he handled in the DCU when it came to characters like Superman. I didn't expect that for everything because, lanterns, even though we have Green Lanterns with power rings, it was still going to be, as we know, tackled in a way like True Detective. So all while it's a comic book show with, people who literally fly with Green Lantern rings and we're going to see constructs, I don't know if you would say it's as comic booky as as out there as Superman was. So Man of Tomorrow is apparently making a little bit of a tonal shift there, which is interesting, also interesting, I should say, when you consider that a villain like Brainiac might be used. Maybe it's just the severity of tone, but yeah, it's just intriguing. Obviously, Clayface, another different thing, completely different. And, speaking of all of this, Gunn did go on to say, I love the mashup of different genres and seeing these characters go from one genre to the other. I'm watching the dailies of Clayface all the time. I'm like, this is totally different. Watching episodes of Lanterns, which is also very grounded, but not grounded in the same sort of comedic, fecked up way as Peacemaker, but grounded in a much more sort of serious way, I guess you could say. And each of these things are different, and what is so fun for me is for them to be in the same world and to really give the different creators a lot of leeway in what they can do. And when I say that, I also include myself when I work on different projects. So very intriguing stuff there. Overall, it's what we know about the DCU, and one of the things that I love most about the approach from DC Studios, all while projects are canonically connected, such as Clayface and Lanterns, they're all in the same world. You're going to have differences in genre and tone and approach and production between Clayface and Superman and Man of Tomorrow to Lanterns, and that is so cool to me, because it's the approach of what makes movies like, when you compare, I always say this as well, something like, whether you like the Batman or not, but the Batman is, that's the artist, the director's vision shining through, versus that of your studio-mandated, executive-controlled, kind of cookie-cutter-esque movie where, sure, it will add a little bit of a flair of the director's vision, but overall it needs to maintain the, the boundaries of this universe in terms of approach and style and we need to break out of that, and so that's why I'm so grateful for where, yeah, sure, we're going to get some comic booky feeling, formulaic, probably to the DCU feeling projects in the DCU, but we're also getting very auteur, visionary things, hopefully, at the same time with Lanterns and, Clayface and so on, so forth. Now, when being asked about Batman in the DCU, Batman casting news, he instantly kind of interrupts and says that there's just no news, unfortunately. The script isn't done. I mean, I've got somebody writing a script, and I think it's really good, but it isn't finished yet. And then Mallory Rubin points out that Peacemaker podcast episode where Gunn made that comment about 1923 and how fans perceive that as a clue, perhaps, as to the scouting and casting front of Batman, and Gunn responds, I mean, do I have an idea about actors who could play Batman? Absolutely I do. I have guys I like. I have guys that are at the top of the list for me, just like people that were at the top of the list for Superman. But let me tell you something. Those they aren't David Corenswet, so they didn't get the job. So people can guess, and maybe they'll be right about certain things. I don't know what you're talking about specifically, but that doesn't mean that's going to be, you know what I mean? It's totally up in the air. We'd have to screen test, we'd have to do the whole thing. It's unlikely I'm going to hire someone that's like, oh, it's Sylvester Stallone as Batman, we're just hiring him. He's not going to audition, I'm saying I'm making up a huge star who doesn't audition. It's unlikely that Batman's going to be one of those guys, but it is possible. I know one actor in particular who is, a pretty big star that wants to be Batman. We've talked about it, but I don't think, I'm not sure that's the case, I mean, it's such a terrible answer, but it's an honest answer. That's the truth. Mallory then says, yeah, a lot of people are like, James Gunn is watching 1923. What does it mean? And then he says, okay, I see what you're saying. But listen, 1923, that's a really good TV show. Like, I can't believe how good that show was. So this is really what I have been saying for a long time, and how when I say that, I make sure to point out how when he saw Millie Alcock in House of the Dragon, he instantly knew that she might be towards the top of his list, possibly at the very top. Just like what you said about there's dudes out there right now who are at the very top, possibly the top of his list for Batman. But just like what I say when it came to Millie Alcock, just because she was his favorite, he will still screen test them alongside other actors, just like how Matt Reeves wrote the Batman script with Robert Pattinson in mind, even to the point of where he thought, oh God, like, you know, what am I going to do if, like, he doesn't want to do it, you know, because it is so perfect for him that he struggled to see anyone else. But he still screen test with other actors like Nicholas Hoult, because, you know, what if Pattinson wasn't as good as what he thought in his head? Same with Millie Alcock for Supergirl. We had these other actresses audition, but it still turned out to be Millie Alcock. Same with Batman here. He has people he will absolutely bring in, but even if he thinks that it should be in, let's just say, Brandon Sklenar, because the whole 1923 thing here is being referenced, and he eventually, when Mallory said that other thing, was like, okay, I see what you're saying. He will still want to confirm if Brandon Sklenar in this hypothetical is the best choice, because, you know, if he brings in these other people, he might be like, oh, well, damn. I thought it was going to be Brand, but it should be this other guy, like Tom Brittney or whoever else, right? But it could, just like Millie Alcock, still end up being Brandon Sklenar. We just don't know. We don't know, but it is cool. I would love to get in Gunn's head and know who's in his top 5 list. Like, he confirmed. He's absolutely I do. I have guys there at the top of the list for me. But as he said, still gonna have to screen test, do the whole thing. So who are those people? Some people were saying with this whole 1923 thing, oh, this means he's not, Brandon Sklenar's not a contender. Absolutely the opposite. Gunn would not be like, in this moment, like, he wouldn't feed into the whole, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, Brandon's in the list, by the way. No. He would just kind of divert to be like, oh yeah, but listen, 1923 is a really good show. Of course, he would just say that anyway. Like, I'm sure he means it, but he's not going to be like, yeah, Brandon Sklenar is in the top list that I have in mind for Batman. No, but I think if anything, he will. I've said this the whole time. He is one of the actors who is a really good candidate to be screen tested. Like, and do the whole thing there. He could go for a much bigger actor, but I feel like a candidate like Sklenar is in the right kind of group, the right kind, all the fish in the pool. Like, he's swimming around in there as well. It's just, will he be the one that, gets reeled in? I don't know. Now, obviously, Gunn could be kind of being very vague here. Like, I'm sure he would lie as best as he can if it came to the whole, but what if he's cast him already? And the only reason I want to entertain that is, Batman having a presence in Clayface or in Man of Tomorrow. And Man of Tomorrow, I guess he wouldn't be cast right now necessarily, but these are interesting things to talk about, because it is kind of nuts to be like, okay, one of the founders of the Justice League one day won't be involved in a threat. Like, and this Batman's definitely out there already in present day with a history of some kind of Batman. You're telling me he's not going to get involved in helping fight against someone? Now, I know Batman's more of a ground force guy, but he has been known to kind of, with all of his kind of Wayne Enterprises stuff, get up and out there as well. I mean, Lex Luthor, war suit. So do you see what I mean? The whole, like, but Batman can't fly in outer space. I don't think this is going to be a uniquely space epic kind of film like Supergirl. I think it's going to mix and match kind of thing. Like, I think Brainiac or whoever it is will be parked up right at Earth. Like, maybe things will be sent down. Either way, I'm going down the rabbit hole here again. But, arguably maybe Batman could be a Man of Tomorrow. But what about Clayface? I think with Clayface, there will be some kind of Bat presence, but maybe one you don't have to cast someone for. Think Creature Commandos. I know some people think, well, if you're just going to do that, don't do it at all. I actually disagree. I think any kind of, even if they do kind of do a rooftop shadow, and you see, then the camera cuts to Matt Hagen's face, and he's like, that would be pretty sick still. Like, that, I think that really would. And it just makes us kind of get more eager for the DCU Batman. Now, again, I mention all of this because obviously here, throughout the whole thing, he's talking like no one's been cast, and they still need to do the whole screen test thing, no matter who it is. Like, they'll always be screen tested among a bunch of people. So does this indicate that we won't be getting Batman at all in any way, shape, or form in Man of Tomorrow, let alone Clayface? Now, continuing on the Batman talk here with YMH, so getting into the whole, what is Gunn's ideal version of Batman? He responds, I think that's one of the fun things about Batman, though, is that there are so many expressions of Batman that are cool, and different ways to access that character is one of the ways in which he's so iconic. So I don't think it's a matter of the blue and the gray or the black Batman. I think both of those things are really cool. I like the detective Batman, but I also like the fighter Batman. That's just the brute. That's, fighting. I like the silly 50s Silver Age Batman with Batmite. That's kind of closer to what the original Batman TV show was like. I liked all of these different versions of Batman. But I will say, in the same way that was your experience with Batman, that was my experience with Batman 2 as a kid, because I'm older than you. Reading the sort of early 70s Neil Adams Batman comics that were much darker and grittier, and I was like, oh, I like this Batman, I'd seen the sillier Batman, I'd seen the sillier Batman on TV, and I'm like, oh, this is gritty, cool Batman. And that was the thing that made me feel more like, if not an adult, at least a teenager when I was 8 or 9 years old. I really still like that version of, I like that version of Batman that was sort of a Batman we've never seen. And then he points out this one comic on Google Images and said, that's it, man. That was my favorite story. That was in a compilation of Batman comics that I read, and I just thought it was the greatest ever. And it was Batman, supernatural Batman too, which is something we've never seen Batman in, like a sort of supernatural environment. And this Batman is absolutely what I will just say is, yes, a very fantastical Batman. And it's music to my ears hearing Gunn talk about this, because my stance here, I'm not a merger bro, and I love the idea of a Batman, like the best of both worlds. Again, without getting into this whole argument, I understand why not everyone's on that same page. They love Pattinson's Batman. They love his look of Batman. So how great would it be for him to be DC Batman? But in my mind, it's like, hey, we can have his awesome detective noir-driven Batman over here, but we could also have a fully embraced Neil Adams, Grant Morrison, fantastical comic book Batman here, where it's just, unapologetically giant-ass Batcave, giant-ass freaking dinosaur in a corner, a story like the one he pointed out, the Demon of Gothos Mansion, where Bruce goes in there and, it's like a haunting investigation. I'm not saying he's literally going to adapt that, but it's what Gunn is saying here. It's all the right signs as a Batman fan who likes the more grounded, unwound, fantastical aspects of Nolan's trilogy, of Matt Reeves' trilogy, with more of a bit of a comic book flair, obviously, in Matt Reeves' trilogy, but also absolutely adores the video game Batman, the comic book Batman, all of that, and the animated Batman, where they just be like, hey, so how about seeing this guy actually interact with ghosts, supernatural aspects, a flying man-bat, all of this stuff? I am desperate to see that. And knowing that we can get that in the DCU, whether it still be a few years away, I'm all in favor for that. Hearing such a lengthy explanation of that type of Batman that Gunn described, knowing that he is absolutely going to make sure we get that, so long as the DCU is still around and successful enough to get to that point. That's another thing. But knowing he will, if things are good, it follows the plan, we're going to get that. Like, he's going to make sure he is, he's got one eye at all times on that kind of creation with whoever the heck is really handling that. Because apparently the writer is absolutely on it. Again, we've had updates where apparently I think we have a really, really good story with what's happening with Batman. And also in the other interview where he's kind of saying that the script is really good, but it's just not finished yet. So they're taking extra time with this. And that is, I love everything I'm hearing, basically. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to end this video here. Another long Boba ramble. Let me know your thoughts about everything down in the comments below. If you have made it to this point of the video, we would greatly appreciate a like. Consider also hitting the hype button to help my channel get out there a bit more. That's apparently what it does. But until next time, again, really appreciate you watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. I'll see all of you guys in the next video. Goodbye.